We want to broaden the conversation, talk about more than the leadership of the WTO, but given how much pressure the WTO has been under politically, in particular from the US, I'm sure strong leadership of the WTO is important. So what kind of person, what kind of qualities do you think the WTO needs when looking for this new leader?
Well, a headhunter would say this job profile necessitates political skills, political experience, diplomatic capacities, and some expertise in trade. Now, depending on moments, the proportion of these three elements vary. This time, I think the major quality would be a political clout, capacity, authority, then some diplomatic capacity, talent, and I would only put trade expertise as number three, because this time is a very dangerous time for the World Trade Organization. It was already a bit weakened before the COVID crisis, but given the amount of problems which will stem from the way the COVID crisis has been managed for world trade, you need somebody really solid. And by the way, if I look at the field for the moment, there are quite a number of big shots who seem to be wanting to run.
Any names? I don't suppose you have any names for us, Pascal, a short list?
No names. As a former Director General of WTO, I cannot comment on names. This is a decision that has to be taken by WTO members themselves. They have to elect the new DG of WTO while recognizing that it is a member-driven organization, and the Director General of the WTO is not the equivalent of a national minister.
Could you tell us, Pascal, if you think it should be a European?
No comment on that, because the moment you start looking at flags and countries, the reality is that if you look at the history of GATT and WTO, quite a large number of Director Generals have come from Europe. Some came from Asia, some came from Latin America. So far, nobody came from Africa.
Okay, that's interesting. What is going to be the biggest challenge, do you think, facing, given you've talked about the political skills needed for the Director General, Pascal, what will be the biggest challenge facing a new Director General of the WTO?
I think there are two major challenges. One, we pre-existed the COVID crisis, which is how to keep the US within the tent and how to bring China more into the tent. And that's the big geopolitical, geoeconomic background problem, given the major divergences that have appeared between US and China for quite a bit of time. That's the sort of medium, long-term challenge. Short-term, the WTO will have to ease out the impact on trade distortions by huge, massive public money in the economy and by the rise of what I call precautionism, which is a higher propensity of sovereign states to protect their population from risk, which is a different ballgame from the traditional protectionism, which is about protecting your domestic producers from foreign competition. So hard time for the few years to come, so that the impact of the COVID crisis, which will be trade distorting, is progressively eased out.
Do you expect, I mean, certainly we've seen globalization look unpopular with the U.S.-China trade war, with Britain quitting the European Union. Do you expect to see globalization on a continued decline?
No, I think, globalization will remain globalization, i.e., the growing interdependence of economies stemming from the multilocalization of production chains, whether in goods and services, will remain, although probably reshaped. Globalization is a process, but there are various incarnations, there are various patterns. This COVID crisis will impact globalization. It will, in some cases, lead to shrinking some of these value chains which have appeared as fragile, notably in the medical sector. But in other areas, the rapid digitalization and the acceleration of digitalization of this planet will probably also lead to an increased length of some value chains, notably in services. So I think globalization as a process is not at stake, but what will change is this pattern of globalization as it would change under any big repricing of energy, carbon. This time is the repricing of risk and human life, which will influence the pattern of globalization.
In terms of that globalization story, the role of the United States in being supporters of globalization, key, of course. Robert Lighthizer, the representative on trade in the United States, saying he doesn't want, he said just a day or so ago, he doesn't want the US to pull out of the WTO. Do you still see solid US support for world trade?
No, I mean, the Trump administration, and I'm using a diplomatic euphemism on purpose, has not been very supportive of WTO, has not been supportive of globalization, has not been supportive of multilateralization, has not been supportive of international cooperation and coordination, which is, in a way, incompatible with Trump's doctrines of America first. The US should care first and foremost about their own interests. Now, in the name of this extremely aggressive position of Trump, would the US at some stage quit WTO? I never thought so. The cost for the US economy of leaving the WTO would be absolutely enormous. So I've never believed that, while I also recognize that the present rules of WTO do not discipline enough a number of trade distorting measures by some member states, including state aids, subsidies by China.
Let me just quickly ask, are you concerned that the Brexit will take place without an agreement? Do you think that it'll fall back on WTO tariffs? And is that a problem?
Well, yes, I'm concerned. Yes, there is a probability that the economic exit will be done without a trade deal, hence under WTO rules. And by definition, anything less than the nirvana of open trade, which is the internal market, will be bad for the UK economy, and as a proportion of that, bad for the EU economy. So the question is, how bad will it be? Will it be small bad, medium bad, big bad? This we don't know, and the answer lies in the definition by the UK government of what exiting the internal market means. How much does UK intend to diverge from EU norms, standards? That's the real question. If they want to diverge a lot, which in my view would not make sense, but that's their decision, then the border will be thick and costly. If they diverge little, then the border will be thin and much less costly. This is what's at stake for the years to come.